Hello, my name is Jeff Liebmann, and I'm the minister here at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Midland, Michigan. I want to welcome you to one of our online sermons that we provide for those of you who can't be with us here in person on Sunday morning. The title of this service, which is for Labor Day weekend in 2011, is called Obedience. The opening words come from a speech written by Adlai Stevenson, a Unitarian statesman and diplomat who ran unsuccessfully for president in the 1950s twice. The title of the speech is The Nature of Patriotism. It was always accounted a virtue for one to love one's country. With us, it is now something more than a virtue. It is a necessity, a condition of survival. When an American says he loves his country, he means not only that he loves the New England hills, the prairies glistening in the sun, the wide and rising plains, the great mountains, and the sea. He means that he loves an inner air, an inner light, in which freedom lives and which one can draw the breath of self-respect. For reflection reading, I will continue with this speech by Adlai Stevenson. What do we mean by patriotism in the context of our times? I venture to suggest that what we mean is a sense of national responsibility, which will enable America to remain master of her power, to walk with it in serenity and wisdom, with self-respect and respect for all humankind. A patriotism that puts country ahead of self. Patriotism which is not short, frenzied outbursts of emotion, but the tranquil and steady dedication of a lifetime. This is a mighty assignment. For it is often easier to fight for principles than to live up to them. Unhappily, we find some things in American life today of which we cannot be proud. What can we say for the self-styled patriot who thinks that an African American, a Jew, a Catholic, or a Japanese American is less an American than he? That betrays the deepest article of our faith, the belief in individual liberty and equality, which has always been the heart and soul of the American idea. What can we say for the man who proclaims himself a patriot and then for political or personal reasons attacks the patriotism of faithful public servants? To me, this is the type of patriotism which is, in Dr. Johnson's phrase, the last refuge of scoundrels. The anatomy of patriotism is complex, but surely intolerance and public irresponsibility cannot be cloaked in the shining armor of rectitude and righteousness. Nor can the denial of the right to hold ideas that are different, the freedom to think as we please. To strike freedom of the mind with the fist of patriotism is an old and ugly subtlety. And the freedom of the mind, my friends, has served America well. The vigor of our political life, our capacity for change, our cultural, scientific, and industrial achievements all derive from free inquiry, from the free mind, from the imagination, resourcefulness, and daring of men and women who are not afraid of new ideas. Most all of us favor free enterprise for business. Let us also favor free enterprise for the mind, for in the last analysis, we would fight for the death to protect it. Why is it then that we are sometimes slow to detect or are indifferent to the dangers that beset it? obedience. A couple of years ago, I was asked to participate in a Memorial Day observance coordinated by the American Legion post in Smithton, Pennsylvania, where I recently served. A delightful little parade featuring the high school band, Little Leaguers, classic cars, was followed by a solemn observance of the Veterans Memorial. I offered the invocation and the benediction to a crowd of several hundred people, including veterans of several military engagements, active duty soldiers, families, friends, and neighbors. I was happy to provide this service to that community, although I will admit to wrestling with certain issues beforehand. For instance, this was my first experience with offering a public prayer to a broadly interfaith but largely Christian audience. Also, as a pacifist with no personal military service experience, I felt conflicted by complicity with the larger implications of American empire building, in spite of the overriding intent of the ceremony to commemorate those who died preserving our freedoms and our liberties. I found it difficult not to think of those soldiers who died because of friendly fire. I found it challenging not to think of those countless civilians who have lost property, their health, even their lives due to aerial bombing. I found it hard not to think of the mothers and fathers, brothers and sisters, wives and husbands forced to cope with the death of young loved ones. I found it demanding not to dwell on the not-so-noble reasons our country has gone to war during my lifetime. I found it tough to balance the memorial aspects of our patriotic observances with our glorification of the symbols of America over the ideals for which my country stands. For instance, occasionally Unitarian Universalist congregations face the issue of whether or not to display an American flag in their sanctuaries, especially on national patriotic holidays. Doing so raises issues of separation of church and state, and the potential for at least indirectly supporting governmental actions that stand at odds with our religious convictions. On the other hand, Unitarian Universalism stands for human rights and democracy, largely because so many of the founders of this nation, such as John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, were themselves Unitarians, either in spirit or in membership. This is a complex issue, capable of raising strong emotions on both sides. But this intriguing debate is not what lies heavily on my mind today. This weekend, as we celebrate another holiday of national revelry, of parades and pride in the skills and efforts of our workers, the fate of the souls of my countrymen and countrywomen troubles me. The future of the collective soul of the American people concerns me. For once again, all across this nation, particularly as the cacophony of presidential electoral rhetoric begins to consume discussion in every venue of conversation, the arm of patriotism flails unchecked by the voice of reason and the compassionate heart. And I worry whether that hand will clench into a fist of intolerance or open into a clasp of cooperation. Shortly after the start of the trial of German Nazi war criminal Adolf Eichmann in Jerusalem in 1961, a Yale University psychologist named Stanley Milgram devised an experimental study to test the unthinkable hypothesis that millions of accomplices would merely follow orders, even if those orders violated their deepest moral beliefs. Milgram's experiments attempted to measure factors affecting the willingness of study participants to obey an authority figure who instructed them to perform acts that conflicted with their personal conscience. Milgram first described his research in 1963 in an article in the Journal of Abnormal and Social Psychology, and later discussed his findings in greater depth in his 1974 book, Obedience to Authority, An Experimental View. 3 people took part in each experiment: the experimenter, the learner, and the teacher. Now, only the teacher was an unknowing participant in the experiment who had volunteered for monetary compensation in a research project. The role of experimenter was played by a stern, impassive biology teacher dressed in a gray lab coat. The role of learner was played by a 47-year-old accountant trained to act for the part. Now, the teacher and learner were told by the experimenter that they would be participating in his study of memory and learning in different situations. The subject, the unknowing participant, was given the title teacher, and the confederate that of learner. They were then placed in different rooms where they could hear but not see each other. The teacher was then given a list of word pairs that he was to teach the learner. The teacher read the entire list of word pairs to the learner through a microphone. The teacher would then read the first word of each pair, followed by 4 possible answers. The learner would press a button, A, B, C, or D, to indicate his response. If the answer was incorrect, the teacher was told to administer an electric shock to the learner through an elaborate machine of switches, which marked doses increasing in 15-volt increments for each wrong answer. The teachers believed that for each wrong answer, the learner was receiving actual shocks. Now, in reality, there were no shocks. After the confederate was separated from the subject, a tape recorder integrated with the electroshock generator played pre-recorded sounds for each shock level. The tape played complaints about the pain and requests that the experiment be stopped. After a number of voltage level increases, the actor would start to bang on the wall that separated him from the subject. After several times of banging on the wall and complaining about a heart condition, all responses by the learner would cease. Now, at this point, many teachers indicated their desire to stop the experiment and check on the learner. Some teachers began to question the purpose of the experiment, but most continued after being assured by the experimenter that they would not be held responsible. Sometimes the teachers would laugh nervously or exhibit other signs of extreme stress once they heard the screams of pain coming from the learner. If at any time the teacher indicated a desire to halt the experimenter prodded them with a succession of verbal commands. Please continue. The experiment requires that you continue. It is absolutely essential that you continue. You have no other choice. You must go on. If the subject still wished to stop after all 4 successive verbal prods, then the experiment was ended.